Morning everybody. So today we're on the 9th of April, I think, and today I'm going to sow lots of seeds, lots of the things that like a bit more warmth than the stuff I've sown before, and I'm just going to show you how I sow the largest seeds this morning. So I've got all my trays with pots in ready to go, and I've got my compost here. So I'm going to sow beans, sunflowers, sweet corn, and all the cucurbits, which is the courgette family, so squashes, courgettes and cucumbers. And they've all got fairly large seeds, and I choose to use slightly larger pots than your average pot for these. And that's because I want them to grow strongly and not to have to pot them on and put them into a different pot before I put them into the ground. And you never quite know when it's going to be the right temperature to be able to put them out into the ground, because they're all frost tender. That means if there's a frost, it will kill them. So they can't go out until we're absolutely guaranteed there's going to be no frost, which could be as late as the end of May. So I want them to have plenty of nutrients in the pot I'm planting them into, so that they will thrive in there until they're ready to go into the ground. And if they're in a smaller pot, they're much more likely to run out of space and nutrients, and that is one thing that can really weaken a plant and then make it much more susceptible to attack by things like aphids and slugs when you do plant it in the garden. So growing strong seedlings is really important if you want to grow healthy, robust plants. Also, I'm using a potting compost mix rather than a seed compost for these, and that again is because they're going to be quite a long time in the pot, and all of these plants are quite hungry. They need quite a lot of nutrients. So I've filled my pot with a potting compost mix, and I'm going to first of all start off with sowing courgettes. So here's the courgette seed, quite large. And you want to plant it on its side, because you're never quite sure which way it's going to shoot from. So you plant it on its side, then whichever way the root shoot comes out, it will find its way downwards. So you just push it down into the soil to about its own depth underneath the soil and cover it up. Simple as that. There we go. And then of course you have to remember to label it. I've been raiding the kids' craft supplies for labels. Remember to label it, and I will sow all of the large seeds in exactly the same way. So all the beans, the sunflowers, the sweet corn, and all the other cucurbits. Now some of them have got much smaller seeds, like these interesting looking mini pickling cucumbers. So obviously I won't sow them as deeply, but I'll sow them all in the same way, and I'll sow where I possibly can. I'll sow one to a pot, so they've got plenty of nutrients and space to grow. They'll then be watered, and somehow or other I have to fit them all into the greenhouse until they've germinated and are ready to go out. Okay, so what am I going to sow today? So I've shown you already the courgettes, which are going in. I've got another variety of courgettes. These are a bit old. The date on the packet is 2017, so they're a little bit of a risk whether we'll get some good germination. So what I'll do with those is I'll put 2 in a pot, and then I'll thin them out, so I'll take the weakest seedling out. I'm also growing 2 kinds of squash. Squash is a very easy crop to grow once it's germinated. It will ramble all over the garden, and it will give you big hard skinned squashes at the end of the season, which will store all winter. We're still eating ours from last year now. I'm going to grow an eating cucumber and a pickling cucumber. Everybody in our house loves pickled cucumbers. Sweet corn, sunflowers. I've got one of the very tall varieties, which the children love to grow. In fact, they'll plant those with me later. And then I've got some of the branching varieties, which are much smaller, and I prefer how they look. And then I've got 2 kinds of beans. We're not runner bean fans in our family, so I don't grow runner beans. So I do grow 2 kinds of French bean, and one is a climbing one, which will get very tall and need supports, and that one I'll grow here in the garden. And one is a dwarf one, which only grows about so high, and that one I will grow under protection at the allotment because the pigeons will eat it otherwise. So that's 2 kinds of French beans. So when they're all sown, I need to fit them into the greenhouse. If you haven't got a greenhouse, these plants do need some warmth, so you can't just leave them outside at this point in the year because we've still got very cold mornings and cold nights and there's still a risk of frost. So they could either go inside on a sunny windowsill like the seeds that we've planted previously, or you can try and construct some kind of protection for them outside, and bubble wrap is really good for that because it's insulating. And it also acts like a mini greenhouse. So bubble wrap or plastic or sheets of glass, old windows, and you can create your own sort of cold frame to keep these seedlings nice and warm until the weather's warm enough for them. If you haven't got a greenhouse or space to create a cold frame, and or if it's a bit later on in the season, then all of these larger seeds can go directly into the soil. So if you wait a month until the middle of May, then you can actually sow your beans and your sweetcorn and your squash directly into the soil. And that can mean that you actually get a better start for them and a better crop if the weather's good and the soil's in good condition. You'll need to protect them from pests when they're very small. And the reason I don't do that is because a lot of these go to the allotment where I'm not around to protect them, so they tend to get a better start going in pots. But just thought that worth mentioning, that you can sow all these things directly. You don't have to do what I'm doing here today.